So I bought the portable Dreamcast on AliExpress. How much was it? Was it worth it? What is it built out of, and what's the build quality like? How does it run the games, and does it come with any games preloaded on it? These are all very valid questions that I have, and good news, I have one here. So we're going to open it up, we're going to check it out, and we're going to answer them all. So it has been one of my lifelong dreams to eventually get a handheld version of my favorite Sega console, the Sega Dreamcast. This little project is something I have talked to Dr. Mod about a number of times. And while he does have the capabilities to put something like this together, the amount of resources and just overall time to do it was almost not worth it, especially since you can go on a place like AliExpress and buy one. But what are you getting? Let's find out. This is the portable Sega Dreamcast. And I will say, we originally ordered it in that classic Dreamcast gray, and for some reason, it came in more of like a off-brand Temu Hulk green. But truth be told, I love the color green, so the color doesn't bother me that much. So what exactly is this thing anyways? That's why we ordered it. We wanted to know. And come to find out, much like the handheld GameCube that is also available on AliExpress, at the core of this thing is actually a Dreamcast motherboard. And if you look close enough, a real Dreamcast VMU. I thought the VMU was a really nice touch. So let's start with the internal guts of this thing. Like I said, it is a Dreamcast motherboard, just all trimmed down to fit into this case. Obviously, as you can see, there is no disk drive, so how does it play the games? Turns out, it actually plays the games exactly like the Dreamcast mod from Dr. Mod does, off of an SD card. And this is done via GDEMU, which is an optical disc emulator. So it's a mod that emulates an optical disc that is then run on native hardware. So it's sort of tricky. It's not technically running an emulator. These games are running on native Dreamcast hardware. Now that we're past that, let's take a look at the build. As you can see, it is 3D printed, and sometimes I'm not a huge fan of the 3D print because you could tell that it's 3D printed. You get those really weird scan lines. It looks like the D-pad and all the buttons are 3D printed also. Now, I will say I do like the design of the 3D print because it actually does resemble a cross between a Dreamcast controller and a Dreamcast console. So whoever designed this shell, I give them a thumbs up. Speaking of thumbs, the thumbstick here actually does look and feel like it might be pretty close to the original thumbstick from a Dreamcast. And of course, on the back of it, we do have both triggers. Even though this thing does look like a monstrosity at first sight, once you get it in your hands and you hold it, it's really not that uncomfortable. It's nowhere near as comfortable as an original Dreamcast controller because let's be honest, for the time, these things were near perfect. I am still waiting for another console manufacturer to design their controllers in this like pontoon boat shape. It just feels perfect in your hands. Overall, the build quality isn't bad. I'm not a huge fan of the 3D print lines, and while I actually don't mind the color of this, I'm also not a huge fan of the paint job. So I might actually take this thing apart, use some primer, and give it a nicer paint job so it doesn't look so 3D printed. Now, as far as the screen goes, this is a 5-inch LCD screen, and it's actually not that bad. Let's turn it on and check it out. I'm going to turn the volume all the way down because the speakers do kind of blast on this thing. All in all, the quality on the screen is pretty good. It's what you would expect out of any handheld. And I would say it's actually more than you would expect out of a handheld you would buy on AliExpress. Now that we got all that out of the way, let's talk about what this thing actually comes with. It's advertised on the site to come with a 64 gigabyte SD card. What was on that SD card? Truth be told, it was a handful of Dreamcast ROMs, and honestly, most of them were games that I wasn't really interested in playing. But coincidentally, this thing is running the DCSX mod, which is the same mod that Dr. Mod uses in his Dreamcast. So it was really easy to grab a larger SD card and pop all the games that I want to play on it. In fact, this thing contains the entire North American Dreamcast library, which actually, considering how short the lifespan of the Dreamcast was, isn't a ton of games, but it's still cool that this contains the entire library. And because it uses a mod that we're already familiar with, really simple to do. And as you can see, the list of games on here goes on and on and on. Anything that you would possibly want to play is installed on this thing. We've even put a few translated Japanese games on here as well. One of the really cool things about this portable Dreamcast is the VMU. This is a real VMU, and it functions exactly like the VMU did when you play any of these games. Let me show you. Let's get some audio up so you can hear the speakers while we're at it. And there you can see, check out the VMU. All right, so let's get down to the real nitty-gritty of this thing. Let's talk about battery life for a sec. It does come with its own power brick and an 8.4 volt adapter on top. And believe it or not, this thing does have cooling fans built into it. And it does advertise it gets about 4 hours of battery life. But while I have played it quite a bit, I haven't run it all the way out of battery life. I will say 4 hours of battery life ain't that bad. And now the question everyone's been dying to ask. How much is this thing? Well, it is listed on AliExpress for $487.97. After tax and shipping, it costs $530 to get this thing to me. I paid about $35 for a new SD card, and of course I had Dr. Mod soup this thing up quite a bit. For a collector like me, I really didn't think that was too bad of a price for everything you're getting, but I will say there are a few things personally that I did to this thing right out of the box. And putting a better complete game library on this thing was number one for me. As far as its comfort goes, I actually think that it's a pretty comfortable little handheld. It's pretty thick and it does look a bit clunky, but for what you're getting, I actually think it's pretty serviceable. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the 3D print and the paint job, and even the 3D print buttons. But I think that that's a project that I'm willing to take on since this thing is going to reside in my personal collection. After all, I do just love the idea of having the consoles that I grew up with in a portable form like this. And while I may not play them super often, you can absolutely bet that I will be pulling this out on long flights and playing some Blue Stinger. And there is one more thing that I need to do since this thing is turned on and the fan is blowing directly into my face. You know what it is. The TST. Tofer sniff test. I would give that about a 7. Doesn't smell like new electronics, but it also smells a lot fresher than probably my original Dreamcast. If you want to see more awesome mods like this, you should check out what Dr. Mod is doing to the Nintendo Wii in this video. And if you like portable devices like this, you should subscribe to the channel because soon I will be doing a video just like this on the portable GameCube that I got. So until then, enjoy the journey.